All right, welcome everyone. Today, we're diving into a really big topic, decision making. But we're not just talking about any old choice. We are zeroing in on how critical decisions get made inside the super high stakes and, let's be honest, sometimes chaotic worlds of public and nonprofit organizations. And hey, a huge welcome to our fun little study group for PP5361, Theory and Management of Public Service Organizations. Today, we're tearing into Chapter 5 from our textbook, Managing Human Behavior in Public and Nonprofit Organizations. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's jump right in. I think we have to start with this quote because it just perfectly frames the stakes we're talking about. In the private sector, right, a bad call might lose you some money. But in the public sector, wow, the consequences can be life and death, the fate of nations. The weight on these decision makers is just immense. And this right here is a perfect example of how one decision can just explode into 100 others. Just imagine it. You're the official, you find a crack in a major highway. Okay, decision number one seems obvious, shut it down. But then what? Suddenly, you're drowning in new questions. How do we reroute all this traffic? What about the local businesses that depend on this road? What are commuters supposed to do? Can we add more trains? Where would they even park? See, every single question is a new decision, creating this massive domino effect that touches thousands of lives. So, all of that complexity brings us to a really crucial point. Not all decisions are created equal. And if we're going to manage that chaos, we first need a way to sort and size up the problems that are coming at us. At its core, it really boils down to two types. On one side, you have your program decisions. Think of these as the routine stuff. Ordering more printer paper, processing a standard form, there's a clear procedure, a system. It's the daily grind. But on the other side, you've got non-program decisions. These are the curveballs, the messy, unexpected problems where there is no rule book. This is where real leadership, real problem solving gets put to the test. And here's the thing, where you are in the organization completely changes the game. If you're a first-line manager, your world is mostly filled with those predictable program decisions. But as you climb that ladder, your whole reality shifts. When you get to top management, your job becomes all about the uncertain, the ambiguous, the non-programmed. All the big, messy, strategic choices land right on your desk. Okay, so we know there are different kinds of decisions, but how do they actually get made out there in the real world? Well, to figure that out, we're going to look through three totally different lenses, thanks to a classic framework from Graham Allison that helps us view the exact same situation in new ways. Allison's analogy here is just brilliant. He asks us to imagine we're watching a game of chess. So what are you actually seeing? Are you watching one single rational player making these perfect strategic moves to win the game? Or are you maybe seeing different organizations on the board, where each one just moves its pieces based on its own standard operating procedures? Or is it something else entirely? Just a messy political negotiation between a bunch of competing players, all trying to bargain for control over the next move? So this breaks down into three models. First up is the rational model. This is the classic textbook idea of a single person logically weighing all the options to find the absolute best choice. But let's be real, that's not how it usually works. That's why we have the concept of satisficing. We don't look for the perfect solution, we just find the first one that's good enough. Then there's the organizational model. This lens says big decisions aren't really choices at all. They're just the natural output of how the organization already works. It's about muddling through with small little changes based on what you've always done. And finally, you have the political model, which sees the whole thing as a power struggle, a constant pulling and hauling between different players that ends in a messy compromise, not one clean choice. All right, so that's the high-level theory. But what does any of this mean for you, the manager on the ground, who actually has to make these calls? Let's pivot from theory to practice and talk about the toolkit you can actually use. And we need these tools. We really need them because according to some deep research by Paul Nutt, get this, a staggering 50% of all decisions made in organizations fail. Half. Just poof, gone. That number alone should tell us we have to get way smarter about how we do this. So a huge part of getting smarter is just learning to spot the traps before you fall into them. And here are 5 of the big ones. We're talking about things like ill-conceived goals that accidentally push people to do the wrong thing, or motivated blindness, where we just, choose not to see the inconvenient facts. These are the kinds of mental potholes we have to constantly be watching out for. So how do you avoid those traps? What's the antidote? Well, one of the most powerful ones is right here, diversity. As Frederick Mosher points out, bringing different voices to the table isn't just a nice to have or about being fair. It is a core strategic advantage. It's your shield. It actively fights against blind spots and groupthink, which almost always leads to stronger, better decisions. Okay, another killer tool for your toolkit is the RAPID model. And I love this one because it's all about destroying ambiguity. It forces you to get super clear on who does what, who gets to recommend a course of action, who needs to agree to it, who has veto power, who provides the critical input, who is actually going to perform the action, and this is the big one, who is the one single person that gets to decide. Answering these questions up front gets rid of so much confusion and creates real accountability. Now, this chart lays out 7 principles for success, and they're all great, but I want to zoom in on 2 that are just total game changers. Number 1, a focus on action, not getting stuck in endless meetings trying to get consensus. And number 2, absolute clarity about who is doing what. High-performing organizations don't just talk, they get clear, and then they execute. All right, let's bring this all home. We've talked about the theory, the different types, the tools in the toolkit. Now let's put it all together into a step-by-step game plan that you can actually use to build better decisions. The foundation is everything, right? So step 1, smoke out the real issue. Don't just slap a Band-Aid on the symptom. You got to dig for the root cause. A great way to do that is just keep asking why over and over. Step 2, state your purpose. Get crystal clear on what a win actually looks like. What are you trying to accomplish here? And step 3, set your criteria. This means defining exactly what you must achieve, what you must preserve, and, super important, what you absolutely have to avoid. Once that foundation is solid, you can start to build. 4th, establish your priorities. You got to separate your absolute must-haves from the nice-to-haves. 5th, search for solutions. Now you can finally start brainstorming options that actually fit the rules you've set up. 6th, you test those alternatives against your list of priorities. And finally, step 7, and listen, this is the one almost everyone skips, so don't you skip it. Troubleshoot your decision. Actively try to break it. Ask yourself, what is the worst thing that could happen here? What could go wrong? And then build a plan for it before it happens. And that brings us to the end, so I'll leave you with this final thought, a little homework if you will. Think back to a really big decision you had to make, maybe in your job or just in life. Looking at these 7 building blocks, which one did you lean on the most? And which one did you kinda neglect? I bet the answer to that question will tell you almost everything you need to know about why that decision worked out or why it didn't. Thanks for joining our study session today.